After the Iran war exposed fresh gaps in U.S. strike planning, is Washington now eyeing a sci-fi bomber concept as the next possible replacement for the B-21? Could the Pentagon's next bomber really take off vertically with no runway at all, or is this still just a radical concept on paper? Can this so-called rocket bomber actually replace America's deadliest B-21 Raider, or is the idea still too experimental for real combat? Amid losses tied to the Iran war, is the U.S. now weighing a radical new bomber designed for future long-range strikes? According to Militarnyi, the U.S. Air Force is studying a vertical-takeoff bomber as a possible alternative to the B-21 Raider. The report says the program is being developed for U.S. Air Force Global Strike Command, putting it squarely in America's long-range nuclear and strike architecture. The concept envisions a vertical takeoff, followed by a high-speed strike mission deep into enemy territory. The Air Force reportedly plans to select a winning design within 30 to 45 days after August 4th, moving the project quickly toward the next phase. The new bomber would take off vertically without needing a conventional runway, opening up far more launch options in future conflicts. It would be powered by a liquid-fuel rocket engine, giving it a very different propulsion system from traditional bombers. The aircraft is being designed for long-range strike missions, where speed, reach, and surprise would matter most. After launch, it would accelerate into high-speed flight, turning a vertical liftoff into a fast strike profile. Once the mission is complete, it would return directly to base, without depending on a conventional airfield landing strip. The whole concept is being studied as an alternative to the B-21 Raider, not necessarily as a direct replacement. New Frontier Aerospace is currently seen as the leading candidate for the program, putting the company at the center of this futuristic bomber race. The company is also developing the Pathfinder unmanned aircraft for future testing, which could help prove whether the concept is actually viable. The U.S. Air Force also plans to study requirements for a future heavy bomber program in 2027, suggesting this effort is only the beginning. That review will also examine the future modernization of the B-52 Stratofortress, showing that the Air Force is thinking about both old and new bomber fleets. The project comes as Washington rebuilds missile stocks after months of Iran war operations, raising the question of whether America is preparing for a very different kind of next war. The US is now seeking billions of dollars to rebuild missile stocks after months of intense operations in the Iran war, reflecting how quickly modern conflicts drain high-end munitions. On July 31st, Bloomberg revealed that the Pentagon has submitted a new $67 billion emergency request, a package explicitly tied to the ongoing Iran conflict and its costs. Within that broader request, $18.2 billion has been earmarked to replace key missiles used during recent operations, focusing on the most advanced interceptors and cruise weapons. The funding plan has been formally submitted to U.S. Senate and House Defense Committees, signaling that Congress is now being asked to sign off on this rapid rearmament push. Bloomberg's report comes after months of U.S. strikes on Iranian targets and repeated defensive interceptions against incoming missiles and drones across the region. The Pentagon's shopping list includes about $5.75 billion dedicated just to THAAD interceptors, reflecting how heavily the high-altitude shield was relied on during the war. Another $5.57 billion are set aside for Patriot PAC-3 MSE missiles, the Army's frontline air defense rounds that have been fired repeatedly to stop Iranian attacks. Around $1.9 billion would go to Standard Missile-6 interceptors, a versatile Navy weapon used for both air and missile defense in contested waters. Some $1.3 billion is earmarked for new Tomahawk cruise missiles, replenishing the long-range strike inventory that has been used for precision hits on Iranian targets. A further $1 billion would fund SM-3 Block IIA interceptors, crucial for exo-atmospheric missile defense and increasingly central to US-led protection. About $992 million is allocated to AMRAAM air-to-air missiles, ensuring US fighter jets can continue to engage hostile aircraft and drones without worrying about shortages. The list also includes roughly $692 million for precision strike missiles, expanding the Army's ability to hit key ground targets at long range with conventional warheads. US officials say this emergency request reflects growing concerns over America's missile stockpiles, which have been visibly strained by sustained high-tempo operations. American forces fired 13,629 munitions during the recent Iran conflict, according to Bloomberg, a figure that highlights just how intense and prolonged the campaign has become. Pete Hegseth notes that the request also includes around $21 billion to speed up missile procurement, aiming to push industry to deliver faster and in greater volume. Part of that accelerated funding is targeted at lower-cost precision munitions, which planners hope will carry more of the burden in future operations without exhausting high-end stocks as quickly. Bloomberg's breakdown suggests the funding could buy about 1,137 Patriot PAC-3 MSE interceptors, significantly rebuilding the air defense magazine after months of heavy use. It could also fund roughly 479 THAAD interceptors, restoring the high-altitude layer that has protected bases and allies from Iranian ballistic threats. Around 462 Tomahawk cruise missiles could be purchased, reloading US and allied ships and submarines with long-range precision firepower. The plan includes enough money for about 442 SM-6 interceptor missiles, bolstering the Navy's ability to defend fleets and coastal assets against complex air attacks. Finally, about 433 precision strike missiles could be acquired, expanding the Army's capacity to strike critical nodes deep inside an adversary's territory. Defense analysts point out that the request may not perfectly match the exact number of missiles fired, suggesting it reflects broader planning rather than pure one-for-one replacement. Some line items closely match estimated Patriot and THAAD expenditure during the war, implying those systems are being replenished almost directly for what was used in combat. However, analysts note that other missile requests appear lower than estimated combat consumption, raising questions over whether the Pentagon is also relying on future production boosts and allied stockpiles. U.S. air defenses in the Middle East are no longer attempting to stop every Iranian missile or drone, shifting to a more selective interception posture. Commanders are practicing selective interception specifically to preserve limited stocks of expensive interceptor missiles. The policy prioritizes threats that could hit U.S. personnel, critical facilities, or key allied targets, rather than every incoming munition. If a missile or drone is headed for an empty area or an abandoned building, interceptors may be withheld to save ammunition. This approach has reportedly been used since the early days of the war against Iran, becoming a routine part of air defense planning. Such ammunition conservation practices are common in many militaries, but in this conflict they carry extra weight given the scale and duration of combat. The war is now in its 5th month, and concerns about U.S. ammunition and interceptor levels are steadily growing. One consequence is that some Iranian missiles and drones are still able to reach their targets instead of being shot down. In most such cases, these impacts occur at low-value sites or locations where no U.S. personnel are present. Officials say that in some instances bases were deliberately left to be hit when empty of troops, to conserve interceptors for more dangerous attacks. This marks a change from earlier practice, when almost all threats near U.S. sites were engaged whenever possible. Senior officials say they cannot fully confirm whether any unintercepted munitions have caused casualties under this approach. They acknowledge that the strategy carries real risks even as it helps save high-end interceptor missiles for critical engagements. Since the war began on February 28, U.S. bases across the region have suffered heavy damage from repeated Iranian attacks. U.S. Navy headquarters in Bahrain and Army facilities in Kuwait are among the hardest-hit sites in the current campaign. Reports also describe damage and casualties at American-linked facilities in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Iraq have likewise seen U.S. sites struck during Iranian missile and drone barrages. Preliminary estimates suggest that repairing and rebuilding damaged facilities across the region will cost billions of dollars.